English translation, 269th contact. Sunday, 4th October 1998, 7:50 hours.
Hello, dear friend. You did get me out of bed, but I am still glad you are here. Actually, I was expecting you at night because yesterday was an important day for us, and I thought you would not miss it either. Well, we did everything well and held the elections, even if we had to repeat them. Obviously, I had misunderstood the procedure of the election process during our earlier discussions. Therefore, Christian Freiner had to inform me about the form of the implementation first.
With your greeting, you have already addressed the reason why I woke you up and called you here. But also be greeted warmly, dear friend Edward.
I am sorry about the misunderstanding about the election, which is certainly the reason for your early coming. I probably should have listened better to your explanations back then.
In and of itself, I wanted to call you during the voting process or afterwards, but I saw that you needed rest first because you were very exhausted. For this reason, I have waited until now. But now it has to be, because in the afternoon I have to leave again, because I have urgent things to do. But now to the facts. You did not have a hearing error or misunderstanding in our conversations about the election process. You acted completely correctly and handled everything according to the statutes. It was decided by the High Council that the absolute majority and thus 50% plus one vote, and not as usual a unanimity in the new elections, should determine the result. This means, however, that if, for example, 3 or 4 persons are standing for election, then the person with the most votes wins the election. So 2 rounds of voting are not allowed, as Christian Freiner explained. In both rounds, the voting resulted in a final result of 13 votes for Christina Gasser and for Christian Freiner for 2 different offices. And these 2 results are the only ones to be considered valid, while the second round of voting is invalid and must be canceled. For this kind of election, in which a more absolute form has to decide, the procedure is purely democratic, and this form is the one you rightly called first in the election process. Before you were misled by Christian Freiner and had a second ballot carried out, which no longer fits into a democratic procedure, which has to be handled as it is provided for the secondary core group and the passive group and laid down in the statutes under Art. Den SKG C. The purpose of this form of voting is that each member participating in the elections can express his or her freedom of expression without being influenced in any manner. However, this freedom of expression shall no longer exist if 2 or more ballots are held for the same cause. If a member has expressed their opinion through the election, then this really corresponds to their own decision. If, however, another ballot in the same matter follows, only because different results were achieved, then different members are forced to vote for someone else who they did not want to vote for in the first place. However, this no longer corresponds to a free expression of opinion, but to a dictatorial process, as it is unfortunately common on the earth under the false cover of free expression of opinion and democracy, which, however, truthfully do not exist in this sense.
Darn, then I should have insisted on my opinion.
That corresponds to correctness. You let yourself be misled by Christian Freiner, as was also the case with other group members who found his form of presentation to be correct, but which is fundamentally wrong because it rests in dictatorial and opinion-forcing forms. The second election or the second round of voting was wrong, and its result is unacceptable. Therefore, only the 2 first results for the 2 different elections must be taken into account and recorded. It is simply in no wise acceptable that the free opinion of a member of the group is curtailed in any manner, which, however, is already called into question if a second opinion is required in an election by a second vote in the same matter. The second round of voting must therefore be canceled, since only the first two elections are valid with 13 votes in the favor of each.
I am sorry that I messed up. I should have insisted on my view after all.
That is correct, as we have already stated. Now it is easy to do the right thing and cancel the second round of voting.
We will, of course. I'm going to call an information meeting this afternoon and make the whole thing clear. But one more question. How do you handle elections if you have to carry them out?
In spiritual leadership, unanimity has decision-making power, as is the case with the people. If there are exceptions, however, where the absolute majority has to decide, which only rarely occurs, then these are handled in the form I have explained to you on various occasions, and have done so again in your interests.
Good, thank you. I will sort it out today.
That is desirable, because the problem should not continue further. And if there are votes again, no matter what kind, then these have to take place in the same way as the relevant provisions are, namely that the absolute majority is valid, which applies to elections as well as other things. A form of election that gives all members the same rights and does not dictatorially force them to express a second opinion that contradicts the first opinion. Such things must never appear, for such action is based on coercion and the influence of opinion, which contradicts all free thinking, feeling, and acting.
I am of the same opinion. But I was no longer sure whether I had fallen into a misunderstanding after Christian Frainer made his statement, which is why I then ordered that a second round of elections be held.
It is not your manner of misunderstanding something, which is why you should not be misled.
To err is human. It is the same with you.
Of course. And my words should not be a reproach, but a clarification to put everything right and to guide it in the right direction.
Good. Do you still have some time because I still have a lot to ask?
Of course, I am not in a hurry because I do not have to do my other duties until the afternoon.
Good. On the 23rd of September, I received a fax from Hans-Georg Lanzendorfer concerning an info mail from Florida from Josef Meyer. You know, he is the man with the accounting computer. Here is the fax to which I gave this answer. In addition, my question whether my answer was correct. If you want to read both pages, please. Oh, another question about the elections. A second ballot in the same matter is right if two parties achieve an undecided result, yes?
Of course. This is correct. But in such a case, there must be a casting vote, which can only be given by drawing lots, because there is no other possibility. So you let the final choice in such a case be decided in such a manner as we handle it? By drawing lots to place the two equal parties on rank 1 and 2, so that no conflict of opinion or conscience arises.
Well, then here are the 2 pages.
There is nothing to add to what you have written here as an answer, because it is correct and should be detailed enough.
I am really glad about that. And that brings me to something else. On the 13th of May 1996, we talked about the crop circles. And you revealed to me that you had made the observation that extraterrestrial forces were now involved in what, in my opinion, were simply stupid machinations. At that time you allowed me to retrieve and record the corresponding conversation, but with the reservation that for the time being I was not allowed to publish what had been noted, and not until you had made certain clarifications. My question now is this: whether you have been able to make these clarifications in the meantime, and whether I may now release the 2 report pages.
In the meantime, we have been able to carry out the clarifications, but for the time being, I am not allowed to give any further details or information about them. And with regard to the written part of the conversation concerning the crop circles or the crop circle pictograms, you are allowed to publish it now.
But I have one more question, which does not refer directly to the conversation and the 2 report pages, but to the two crop circle manufacturers, as you called the Germans Joachim Koch and Hans-Jürgen Kieborg. Do the two now actually receive answers to their falsified crop circles or crop circle pictograms, and are they actually connected in this form with extraterrestrial intelligences? Or do they transmit answers to the two via real crop circle pictograms?
No, neither one nor the other is the case. The two have neither contacts to terrestrial nor extraterrestrial beings through crop circles, nor do they receive any answers from forged pictograms. All their actions and speeches, as well as their assertions and book writing, correspond to nothing else but to a self-invented fantasy. And in the manner it is raised and handled, nothing else but cheating and charlatanry.
Then there is another question, which refers to the pictograms themselves. For years now, more and more unknown flying objects have been appearing, which appear in the sky in masses and form figures that can be described as sky pictograms or the like. Do these appearances have any connection with the real crop circle pictograms? I mean, whether they are connected?
That is not really the case, at least in several cases where we did some research. There were celestial pictograms, but they have nothing to do with the crop circle pictograms and nothing to do with alleged extraterrestrials.
And both of these manifestations really extend across the whole world.
That is right. So not everything that appears to be true is always real, because crop circle pictogram forgers have been at work all over the world for a long time. That is, for years, for whatever ridiculous reasons.
Then again a question. The unknown flying objects, the so-called UFOs, which are sighted more and more frequently in all countries, sometimes even in larger arrangements, and which are also sighted in larger numbers, all concern the same place of origin?
No, that is not the case, because there are several different places of origin from where the flying objects come. Besides, not all are at home in your space-time structure, because as we noticed, Earth is also visited by differently dimensioned flying objects and beings that do not come from your space-time structure.
Can one also speak of future visitors?
Yes, that is the case.
Well, then I would like to add the two contact report pages from the 13th of May 1996, which I would like to read to you so that you can add something if you think it is necessary.
The 13th of May, 1996, 14:59 hours.
It has been some time since you told me that now is not the time to expect official contact between extraterrestrials and terrestrials.
The time is really not very far anymore. The only question with regard to the expected contacts is whether the military, secret services, and governments will not once again reshape the open appearance in such a way that the public is misled and the facts are distorted and concealed, as has been done with regard to previous incidents with extraterrestrial flying apparatuses and beings from foreign worlds.
Apart from you Pleiadians, Soim Pleiaren, and the members of your Federation, other Earth foreigners visit our world very rarely, and their flying apparatuses can be observed here and there.
That is right. But that is not our concern, because we do not have any contacts to these foreigners. We have never done that before. However, it is not to be denied that aliens are sometimes present in earthly area who have nothing in common with us.
On your last visit, you also told me that with regard to the so-called crop circles, everything is no longer of a purely earthly human nature, but that for some time now there have also been Earth foreigner influences at play?
That is also true, but I do not want to go into any more detail about it, because we are not allowed to interfere in things and events that are not compatible with our mission. We must not disregard our directives and therefore not violate them.
Then things have actually changed with regard to crop circle forgeries and certain things, just in the sense that now also extraterrestrial influences are involved.
For quite some time, this is actually the case in a swinging wave-based form. However, this does not mean that the pictograms, etc., are not genuine and cannot be traced back to the Earth foreigners. As always, counterfeits are being made by freeloaders who are not exposed to the swinging waves.
And what is the connection between the pictograms which are created by the influence of extraterrestrial swinging wave powers? I think it is rather dim-witted that humans on Earth who are not yet highly developed make themselves felt in this way.
11. So the connection is not to do with coming events within the SOL system, and also not by the announcement of the appearance of Earth foreigners whose ancestors came to Earth earlier. And with regard to the dim-wittedness that you address, you are not wrong, but the dim-wittedness does not lie with Earth foreigners, but with the Earth humans themselves, who in this actually quite primitive form want to draw attention to alleged extraterrestrial events because allegedly a direct and open appearance of extraterrestrials could cause chaos. Through the pictograms, in which even terrestrial humans have a hand in the matter. Terrestrial humanity is supposed to be slowly confronted with things of the future, even if this is indeed a very primitive procedure, tailored to terrestrial humans. So the pictograms must not overlook the fact that there are forgeries that are the work of earthly artists, charlatans and swindlers alone.
I was able to observe such activities with Quetzal's help. But I did not know that pictograms were and are also created in which extraterrestrial swinging wave powers are involved.
There was no need for us to mention this earlier, and moreover, there was and is a lot of dizziness, lies, charlatanry, and deception interwoven in this relationship from the very beginning. This must always be taken into account. We did not give you any false information, but we only concealed certain facts from you, because they would have interfered with your task and would have led many honest seekers into confusion. But now the time has come to give a more precise explanation, because the event from which a connection between terrestrial men and aliens arises has not yet come closer.
According to your concept, not in the near future.
Right. But now let me read your article.
Just a minute. May I ask, how long have you known that extraterrestrial influences are also involved in crop circles? When I watched the deception together with Quetzal, you had not yet mentioned anything about it.
That corresponds to the facts. Because we knew about the machinations of swindlers and charlatans regarding the pictograms, we did not care any more about them, although they appeared more and more frequently. It was not until 1985 when we observed certain things through one of our surveillance flying apparatuses that we turned our attention to the matter again, whereby we then detected activities that were also attributed to Earth-foreign swinging wave powers, through which, among other things, Earth humans were influenced who were active in matters of the performing arts.
And you have been silent about that for so long. But you could have told me that, and I would not have been misdirected. I also would have published these new findings in the Bulletin or in the WZ FIGU publication, Stimme der Wassermannszeit, to orient our members and readers.
Yes, that would certainly have been good. But maybe not, because there are still many questions open regarding the pictograms. And there is still charlatanry and deceit, as always, from people who do not represent and produce the pictures as a result of art, but as a result of deceit. The only thing that is certain for us so far is that there are certain extraterrestrial energy influences that influence humans on Earth, among others, so that they are active in making pictograms. This does not mean, however, that everything concerning the so-called crop circles is allegedly of honest origin, that it is traced back to influences of Earth-foreign beings.
So swindlers, charlatans, and fraudsters continue to work with us, through whom many crop circle believers are led around on a fool's rope, in addition to the fact that the energy-influenced ones naturally continue to do their art.
Liars, swindlers and frauds in the Pleiades sky.
During the contact conversation of the 13th of May 96, the talk turned to the machinations of liars, swindlers, frauds, and charlatans in the matter of mendacious alleged contacts with the Pleiadians sus Pleiaren. There was also talk about the so-called remote viewing, which has recently been making the rounds in the parapsychology world.
Billy. It should also be explained that the pictogram makers influenced by alien energies are ignorant of the influences according to which they consider their actions to be their voluntary work.
But I still find it dim-witted that highly developed extraterrestrials are supposed to make messages in such a primitive kind and wise, or have them made by Earth humans influenced by them, as crop circle believers claim.
You are not wrong about this, although it must be said that the Earth humans responsible for this are still very low in the development. That is peculiar to us Pleiaren. But it must also be said that these Earth humans think in this form because they cannot deal openly with reality through their low intelligence as Earth humans and because they fear a personal panic or a personal chaos. For this reason, they resort to their primitive faith, namely in the form of faith in extraterrestrials and their alleged signs, which are also supposed to be encoded, so that everything first has to be unraveled and only becomes known in certain circles for the time being. The whole thing thus prevents a mass publication of the real truth in the big public, which is why euphoria, fear, panic, or chaos could break out into the crop circle believers. Out of such fears, the crop circle pictures are not produced secretly, but the thought plays along that more interest is aroused by the secretiveness, etc., whereby it does not play a role, however, that terrestrial humans influenced by extraterrestrial energies are active in relation to the pictogram production, and that also swindlers, charlatans, and fraudsters do the same in this regard. Nothing can be added to this, for everything that is necessary has been said and explained.
Too bad. I thought you might have something to say about your clarifications after all.
There is nothing more to say than that extraterrestrial energy activities will accumulate. More I am not allowed to declare officially now.
All right, I do not want to push you. Then I would like to ask you now if you have already received an answer from your linguists of the German language regarding what is correct with regard to the terms einen or einem.
I have received an exhaustive answer to this question, which states that in the German-speaking world in Europe a completely wrong term is used for a personality-related speech. It is wrong to speak of oneself as einen, because correctly it must mean einem. If, for example, one says, unpleasant things bring worries for one, then this is fundamentally wrong. Correctly, it must be said, unpleasant things make one worry. It must therefore mean einem with an M at the end of the word, but not with an N. This word miscontrol and misuse, like many others in the German language on Earth, is due to the lack of understanding of the earthly German language scientists.
They also screw up again with the German language reform.
It is really a pity that low intelligence always wins over good in certain things, just as it is the case in the German language reform.
Recently I was asked whether it is just as common for you on Era and in your federation for humans to do plastic surgeries and the like as it is here on Earth. Until now actually more for the female sex, but recently also more and more for men.
No, such things are frowned upon by us, because all humans with us are of the opinion and conviction that one should age in honor and see and wear the signs of age on the face, hands and body, and never tinker with nature's craft. As you once said, unless uncontrollable circumstances and influences cause physical deformations and devastations, which are then naturally aesthetically repaired and corrected.
Then there is cosmetic surgery, like facelifts, etc. And as is so common among the humans here on Earth, no?
No, I already said that.
The Greek philosopher Pythagoras, born in Samos around 570 BC, probably died in Metapont around 500 BC. Based in Croton in northern Italy, as I wrote there, a union with religious, scientific, political, and ethical aims. This was the Pythagorean alliance. From Pythagoras comes the teaching that the essence of reality is the number, as well as the teaching of the so-called transmigration of souls. Mathematics, astronomy, and acoustics owe important insights to the Pythagoreans. Pythagoreans were especially Eurytos, Archytas of Taranto, Hippasos of Metapont, Ekphantos, and Hecatus. The long explanation for a short question now is whether you know whether Pythagoras was a pure earth-born human or an immigrant from the depths of space. By which, of course, I do not mean Pythagoras as a person, but his spiritual form.
His spirit form was of extraterrestrial origin and came from the Henic lineage, from the lineage of the ancient Lyrans.
Recently I have been asked that it seems almost unbelievable that I have survived 16 assassinations so far with practically no damage. Of course I know why this is so, but you forbid me to talk about why I was so lucky every time. What is it like today? Does the whole thing still have to remain a secret?
It must, for your own protection. If the secret were revealed, the danger would be much greater that you might actually be harmed. We still think that you will not be let out of our sight and that you may be threatened by another attack.
Those are good prospects.
Unfortunately, though, a fact. But now I want to say something about the new board members who will take office at the next meeting. To them it should be said that the board of directors does not offer any reason or authority to rise above the other members of the group and to be bossy and domineering. Also, a board member is no more and no less than a group member with generally equal duties and rights. Also, an arrogant manner is in no wise appropriate because despite the office, an absolute equality prevails, which is not to be overruled by anything. The function of the board of directors merely means that through it the will and regulations of the entire group must be carried out. But also, the function of the board of directors, that is to say the obligation to act as a board of directors, is to represent the association itself as well as its interests externally and internally. And when I say that no board member has to be overbearing and domineering, then I want to specifically address Christian Freiner, who has a certain amount of dominance that he expresses on certain occasions. Especially as an elected member of the board, this is no longer the case, which is why he is hereby instructed to control and reduce his dominance, which corresponds to an urgent need, but also a necessity. If he nevertheless continues to lose himself in an assertive dominant form, then the members should be urged to put him in his place in this regard. But now there is also a word to be said about Andreas Schubiger, as I have already told you on various occasions to explain the same to him. His point is that he must immediately learn to make himself shorter in his speech, since he always tends to become unnecessarily extremely verbose, whereby he talks a lot. However, with it, he does not say anything that is of importance. A circumstance that is very nerve-wracking for the group members and thus affects the mood. So if he does not make an appropriate effort in this respect, then it is appropriate to get him to speak out and end his flood of words.
I have already talked to Andreas about this twice. Do you have anything else to say about the subject?
No.
Well, can I ask another question then?
Of course.
Okay. Then here, the question refers to that. In the new overpopulation pamphlet 1, the short description of the code was mistakenly inserted, and now the question is whether to leave it in or remove it again. Some group members find the code reference annoying and dissuasive. What do you think? Should the whole reissue be exempt from the code reference, or should it be left in the brochure?
In my opinion, it is a very low intelligence attitude that the code reference in the brochure should act as a deterrent. Because anyone who is really interested in the matter and the truth can neither be misled nor deterred by the reference. But whoever is irritated or put off by this, which is doubtful, is not yet capable of recognizing and accepting the real truth, which unfortunately has to be said with regard to the group members who are disturbed by the code hint in the mentioned writing, because they are still fickle in certain things and not so solid to fully stand up for the mission within the desired framework. They still have a lot to learn in this regard, even if they do not want to admit this fact and probably cannot recognize it yet. But now I remember something that I have to say in connection with the new board members. Namely, it refers again to Christian Freiner. He really has the peculiarity of being very assertive, which is particularly undesirable as a board member because a belief in assertions not only restricts the field of vision, but also the individual freedom of the individual as well as the entire groups. Law-abiding and law observance is good and correct. However, not in the sense of an unconditional faith, which impairs and destroys the independent thinking and acting, as well as the individual freedom of each human being. But now, my friend, I would like to talk to you privately if you have no more questions.
I do not have any more, except maybe in terms of whether you are oriented towards the machinations in America regarding Bill Clinton, and if so, what do you think? I am sure your opinion will be of interest to the group members.
Of course I know everything about this. My personal opinion, as well as that of all those working in the field of Earth in our Federation, is that the whole thing is a well-thought-out, political, and above all, infamous intrigue. In addition, it is an inhumane and primitive act of unparalleled quality, which once publicly demonstrates to the world how poor, low, stupid, and primordial the characters of all these Americans are, who are responsible for these machinations, or who agree with them that they have the same inhumane and autocratic attitude. With this politically inflated affair, America shows once openly and in worldwide form whose spirit child, what kind of people they are. It is under the constant cloak of its alleged freedom and humanity in truth, and where its actual tolerance as well as progress and human dignity lie. More should not be said about it. And what I explain also applies to the opinion of our entire spiritual leadership as well as to the entire people of Era, to whom these events in America were reported by way of news, and who expressed themselves centrally about it when a planet-wide survey explored the opinion.
Extremely unpleasant for the image of earthly humankind, at least for those Americans who can be described as scoundrels, of which of course all righteous are excluded, which unfortunately has to be emphasized again and again, because otherwise it is immediately assumed that it concerns all Americans. And this time I have really asked everything so that we can turn to the private. But wait, here is another note. Yes. In the 57th contact of the 23rd of June 1976, Sim Ya-se told me that within a year she would bring me an original document from George Adamski, in which he had admitted that his UFO concerns were only fraud and charlatanry. Sim Ya-se actually brought me a document, but it was only a copy, which I also lost in a strange wise. But I never received the original document.
That is correct. Adamski's document actually existed, but it was destroyed by the person who had it in custody, because he or she did not want Adamski to be exposed posthumously as a fraud. So our people who were responsible for getting the document could no longer get their hands on it, but had to be content with the photocopy given to you. which, by the way, was stolen from you by H. Jacob when you gave it to him for inspection, and he gave you back an empty folded paper. He did not keep the document himself, but passed it on to that source which we still could not fathom. You already know.
I understand. Then now to the private.